Lecture 10, Exporting and File Sharing. So this is the last lecture in the class, and essentially by this point you've learned and you've done all of these things. Now, how do you actually put those files out there into the world and make sure that they keep all of the hard work that you've been doing? So our objectives for this lecture are to look at exporting documents into appropriate formats and making sure that we have that final professional document. So flattening formatting. This is probably a term, like to flatten something. You've probably come across that before, but it's basically just taking all this different work that we've done and putting it into a stable, locked version. And so this is what makes sure that all of that hard work that you've done for the formatting, setting up your styles, like everything like that, making sure that it stays the same for anybody else who would look at that document. And so you need to make sure that you've tracked your changes, you've removed them all, you've accepted all suggestions, resolved comments, converted any kind of complex pieces. So we've talked about locking images, like make sure your tables stay in the format that you want. You can lock shapes, think about like the text wrapping, all those different sorts of things that impact the presentation of it. Make sure those are all locked and fixed. Sometimes in more complicated instances, you might have to convert charts or different diagrams into images to make sure that everything stays the same. That's going to be more for, I would say, like complex scientific documents, not most typical uses, but it is something to be aware of as well. And so generally, best practice is to export to a PDF. And this is your final version because, as we know, a PDF can't be altered, at least not easily and not in that original PDF format. And the PDF is great because it freezes the formatting. So you can get into the case or the situation where you might save it as a PDF or export it as a PDF, export it, not save, earlier than you need to because you still have to make changes. And so you end up having multiple versions of the PDF, right? I do this honestly probably every semester when I'm revising my syllabi. I will get the syllabus all put together and then think that I'm done and save it as a PDF and upload it to eCampus. And then 5 minutes later, I catch something that I need to fix and I have to go redo it and then upload it again. So it's not something that probably you're ever going to be able to perfect completely, but at least know that it's part of the process and something you do have to do. This is also really good for ensuring that your fonts and things like that, the more visual aspects, will stay the same. So you're presenting those in the way that you intended to any of your readers. And so to do this in Word, you go to File, Save As PDF, and then Google Docs, File, Download PDF. And this is what it would look like. So you can also print to PDF, but that's not always as stable for preserving the formatting. So doing it like on the screen here is the recommended route. And so I mentioned fonts. We want to always ensure that font substitution issues don't come up. And so if that happens, this is basically an instance where you have a font in your computer that you've used in your document, and then you're sharing it with somebody who doesn't have that same font downloaded. So you've put in all of that time and effort, you made that choice, but then it's lost. And so this is not going to be the case if you're using something like Times, right? Like everybody's got Times or Arial. More rare, more unique, more stylized fonts. And so in a lot of cases, you actually probably shouldn't be using those anyway. They will sometimes have issues with accessibility. So you want to make sure that you're choosing a font that, visually is clear to read. But there are instances where you'll have clear fonts that maybe are not common. So you embed that manually into Word. So Option Save and Embed Fonts, and then you can export it as a PDF and check and see if it all looks right. So I have an example of when this issue comes out. So this is one that I found online. So the top line is this Meta OT black font, and then Calibri, just because that's a common one everybody has access to, in the second line as demonstration. And so if this file were opened by somebody who doesn't have this font on their computer, that's what they see. So you might be meaning something really intentional with having this bolder, bigger font, and that is completely lost here if that person doesn't already have it. So it's not always going to be an issue that you run into, but it's one of those ones that will sometimes happen, maybe once a year, but it's good to keep it in the back of your mind about how to avoid this. So again, this font is not inaccessible largely, right? This Meta OT Black, it's easy to read, it's clear. There's not like lots of weird little embellishments coming off of it, but still, it's not accessible there. So you have to make good choices about the fonts. And then if you're going to have something that's maybe not super common, ensure that it's embedded there just in case. And so one of the other things that you do when you get to the end of a document is basically troubleshooting all the weird stuff that comes up. So if you're working on a document and it ends up being 35 pages and you have a couple different tables, a couple figures, a couple other images, stuff's going to be moving all over the place sometimes if you don't have everything properly formatted. So some stuff that will often come up is images moving around. And so a lot of that has to do with the text wrapping. And so when the text is moving lines, the image might be moving. And then there will be things with it, showing on a page or not showing on a page, jumping to the next. And so you can anchor the image. So we talked about locking images, or you could insert it into a one-cell table. Sometimes that'll make it a little bit more stable in the document. Sometimes page numbers disappear. And so I think I mentioned this earlier, but sometimes things will happen, or in my case, a dog will walk across the keyboard and you have a random section break in there that you didn't intend to have. And so you go through and search for all of that and make sure that you don't have anything like that there. And then your page numbers, usually you can find them and bring them back. This is one that I would say is good to kind of stay aware of as you're working on the document, so you can try to catch it in action and not at the end when you're trying to save it to your PDF. You also have text formatting randomly changing sometimes. So you can clear all your formatting. If you don't get into the habit of using manual line breaks, that will help a lot. You can cut and paste it all completely back in as unformatted text and go through and reformat it, but that's wasting so much of your time. And so if you're using your styles appropriately, this is going to be an issue that won't come up for you. And then just things crash all the time, right? Whether we expect it because our computer is 10 years old, or it's a freak accident like pouring coffee into your keyboard. Things come up, things happen. And so this is why it's important that you have been backing things up. So the worst thing is when you're at the stage where you're doing all the final polishing at the end of the document and then something bad happens. So you put in all that time and energy and you're so close to being done, and then something bad hits and you have to start all over. So this is basically the end of the class. So what you've gained so far are the skills to create clear and accessible and professional documents. You've had a couple assignments now where you've tried doing a lot of these different things in Word and Google Docs. And so this will likely be more than what you've done previously. So you're going a little bit beyond just the simple, essential ways to use the programs, and you're really starting to maximize all of those tools for collaboration, organization, and revision. So moving forward, we talked a little bit about writing within your papers and like citing things. And so the content obviously is incredibly important, but the other piece of that, especially in the world now, is the presentation of it. And so you need to have that structure built into your documents to be able to present or communicate all of that good thought work across to other people. And so all of this different technology should be supporting you. It shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't feel like it's setting up barriers for you to access things. And so this is where trial and error and practice just really comes into it. So hopefully the assignments you've done for the class will be helpful for that. But I would say keep trying those, keep applying them. Things are going to work differently sometimes. You're going to have different ideas about how to use things. So just get into the habit of using it to make sure that these do become supportive pieces and not hindrances or barriers for you. And then collaboration, accessibility, they aren't like peripheral extra things. Those are actually very integral pieces for using these programs. And so, like I said, unless you're a hermit, you're going to be working with other people. And so using these tools for collaboration makes it so much easier. Accessibility, we need to ensure that everybody can access this material. And so we need that to be able to just have our productive society, right? And so with all of that said, now you're ready to take on these bigger projects. So maybe you haven't done a dissertation yet, but maybe one's looming on the horizon. Now you have the knowledge to be able to deal with a much longer document and not let it kind of take control of you, which can sometimes happen. You're ready for research writing, for professional documents, basically anything that requires you to apply attention to detail. So hopefully all of that's kind of landed and you do feel confident with it all now.